On March 11, 2011, a tsunami that struck the northeastern coast of Japan crippled the cooling system of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The reactor core melted down, hydrogen explosions occurred, and radioactive materials spread into the atmosphere. It was the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. 7 months later, in December 2011, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda confidently announced before a burst of camera flashes that the nuclear accident had entered a containment phase and the situation was under control. But at that very moment, something else was happening inside the Fukushima nuclear plant. A man in a protective suit was walking into a high-level radiation zone. His name was never recorded, his face never photographed, and he was a person who appeared in no statistics. He was a Fukushima nuclear plant cleanup worker. The controlled situation the Japanese government spoke of. Behind it lay an invisible sacrifice. Cleaning up the Fukushima nuclear plant was not something machines could do. People had to enter high-level radiation zones themselves. But who took on this work? TEPCO assigned the work to primary contractors, who passed it to second-tier subcontractors, then third, sometimes all the way down to the 7th or 8th tier. With each layer, middlemen took their cut, and ultimately, the workers on the ground received less than a third of the original budget. And this system had an even darker side. A significant number of the lowest-tier subcontractors were connected to the yakuza, Japan's organized crime syndicates. In the summer of 2011, a black sedan pulled up in front of a homeless shelter in Osaka. The man who stepped out offered a 40-year-old homeless man smoking outside a Fukushima cleanup job with accommodation and decent daily pay. The homeless man had no other options. According to a 2013 Reuters report, a significant portion of Fukushima cleanup workers had been recruited through yakuza networks. The reality witnessed by Japanese journalist Tomohiko Suzuki, who went undercover, can be summed up in 3 shocks. First, wage manipulation. Job listings advertised $150 to $200 per day, but after middlemen and yakuza took their share and accommodation and food costs were deducted, workers were left with just $30 to $50. Second, the protective gear. Unlike the thick protective suits shown on TV, what the actual cleanup workers wore were thin, disposable vinyl suits. The masks were only standard dust masks, and the site supervisors simply said they were better than nothing. Third, dosimeter fraud. Some companies instructed workers to wrap their dosimeters in lead blocks radiation, so readings stayed low, workers could keep working, and companies could keep earning. This was reported in 2012, but ended with only a warning, and the system did not change. In the fall of 2013, a man was brought to a hospital emergency room in Tokyo. Severe vomiting and hair loss. The doctor immediately recognized it as acute radiation syndrome. The man would not say where he had worked, and in his pocket was found a bus ticket to Fukushima. The hospital contacted TEPCO, but there was no such person on their list. Subcontractors also said they didn't know him. No contract, no insurance, no real ID. He was a ghost worker who did not exist in any record. 2 weeks later, he died, and the connection to radiation exposure was never officially recognized, because there was no official record that he had ever worked at Fukushima. As of 2023, 12 years have passed since the Fukushima accident. The Japanese government says the situation has stabilized, TEPCO says cleanup is ongoing, and the International Atomic Energy Agency says it highly values Japan's efforts. Then how many workers have worked here over the past 12 years? The official count is approximately 45,000. But those who worked under false identities, those who worked briefly and disappeared, and those who returned under new names after reaching their exposure limits are not included in this number. Nobody knows the real number, because there is no way to track them. According to a 2018 survey by Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, more than 200 nuclear plant workers were diagnosed with cancer, but only 5 had their cases recognized as work-related. There is a time gap of 5, 10, sometimes 20 years between radiation exposure and cancer. In that time, records disappear and evidence vanishes. Workers who were never recorded in the first place cannot even apply for compensation because they never legally existed. This is the perfect system. Society wants clean energy, governments promise safety, and corporations cut costs. And someone sacrifices in a place no one can see. An unspeakable sacrifice, unacknowledged suffering, an unrecorded death. A man who had worked as a Fukushima cleanup worker once agreed to an anonymous interview. He told his family he worked at a construction site because if he told the truth, his children would be bullied at school. He said he had no room for regret. He had debts to pay, and every night he heard radiation alarms in his dreams, but he had no other choice. The day after the interview, he returned to Fukushima. Even today, in 2024, thousands of people work at the Fukushima nuclear plant every day. Decontamination work will continue for another 30 to 40 years, and the Japanese government has announced it aims to complete the decommissioning by 2051. Until then, how many people will be exposed without record and disappear without record? If behind the safety we take for granted lies someone's sacrifice, and if that sacrifice is neither recorded nor acknowledged, can we truly call it success? Thank you. See you in the next story.